If you have ever felt your heart tighten when eyes turn toward you, if your voice has ever shrunk back into silence while your thoughts raced ahead, then this moment is not an accident, but an appointment with truth. Shyness, fear, and social anxiety are not punishments, nor are they signs of weakness, but habits of thought quietly learned and faithfully repeated until they seemed like facts. Yet every habit can be unlearned, and every false belief can be dissolved by understanding. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that life moves not by force, but by spiritual law, and one of the greatest laws is that the outer world must mirror the inner word. When fear dominates the mind, it projects fearful situations. But when calm certainty is planted within, life reorganizes itself to match that new command. You were never meant to be afraid of people, because people are not judges of your worth, but mirrors reflecting your own belief about yourself. The root of social anxiety is not other people, but the idea that you are separate, exposed, or lacking something essential. In truth, you are complete, supported, and guided, even when your hands tremble or your voice wavers. The subconscious mind obeys direction without argument, and for years it may have been instructed to expect rejection, embarrassment, or failure. It simply followed orders. But the moment you change the instruction, the obedient servant of the mind must respond. Fear thrives in imagination, but imagination is also the doorway to freedom, because whatever you consistently imagine with feeling must externalize in form. When you imagine yourself at ease, protected, and welcomed, you set forces into motion that no anxious habit can stop. Many believe confidence is something others possess by luck, but confidence is simply faith redirected inward. It is knowing that the same intelligence that spins planets and opens flowers is operating through you right now. Nothing is missing, and nothing is required to be added. The old pattern of shrinking back came from trying to protect yourself from imagined danger. Yet what you resist persists, and what you calmly accept dissolves. When you stop fighting fear and instead see it as a mistaken messenger, it loses its authority. There is a subtle turning point that most people miss, a quiet moment when fear expects to be obeyed and instead meets stillness. In that pause, something extraordinary begins to rearrange itself beneath the surface. The mind hesitates, the old script falters, and a new command waits to be spoken. This is where transformation truly begins, not with force, but with a gentle certainty that what once ruled you no longer holds power over your future. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when the mind stands at a crossroads between the familiar comfort of fear and the unfamiliar promise of freedom. And this moment decides far more than any crowded room ever could. Florence Scovel Shinn reminded us that the invisible precedes the visible, and that every outer experience is first accepted inwardly before it appears in form. Social anxiety persists because it has been accepted as inevitable, rehearsed internally until it feels like destiny. Yet destiny is never fixed, it is molded by belief. As you move through life, every encounter with another person activates an inner story, and that story determines whether you feel threatened or at peace. The fearful mind believes it must perform, impress, or defend itself, but the soul knows it only needs to express. Expression is natural, effortless, and safe, while performance is exhausting and rooted in fear of loss. The strange paradox is that the more you try to control how others see you, the more anxious you become, because control is the language of mistrust. When trust replaces control, the nervous system softens, the breath deepens, and the body receives the signal that danger has passed. Yet just as this truth begins to settle, resistance often rises stronger than before, as if fear senses its authority slipping and makes one final demand for obedience. This is where many retreat, mistaking the surge of discomfort as failure, when in reality it is evidence of progress. Old beliefs do not dissolve quietly, they protest. Anxiety may intensify briefly, thoughts may grow louder, and the temptation to withdraw may feel overwhelming. This is the suspenseful threshold, the narrow bridge between who you have been and who you are becoming. If you turn back, the old patterns welcome you with familiar discomfort. But if you remain still and refuse to identify with the fear, something remarkable unfolds. The mind learns a new lesson, that fear can arise without being followed. In this realization, power quietly returns to you. The law of substitution then takes effect, because nature abhors a vacuum, and when fear is no longer fed, faith must take its place. Faith does not mean blind optimism. It means calm expectancy, the knowing that you are divinely protected in every interaction. As this belief takes root, people begin to respond differently. Not because they changed, but because you did. Conversations feel lighter, eye contact feels safer, and silence loses its menace. What once felt like exposure now feels like presence. This is not magic, it is law. The inner word has shifted, and the outer world is rearranging itself accordingly. Yet the full evidence has not appeared just yet, and this delay tests your commitment to the new assumption. Will you trust the unseen long enough for it to crystallize, or will you retreat to the old story out of impatience? This question hangs quietly in the air, shaping what comes next. As the final veil lifts, it becomes clear that freedom from shyness and social fear was never about changing your personality, but about reclaiming your natural state of harmony. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that man's word is his wand, and every thought spoken inwardly shapes experience with quiet precision. When you no longer declare yourself shy, anxious, or afraid, and instead affirm peace, poise, and divine order, life must obey the new command. The miracle is not dramatic or sudden. It unfolds gently, like dawn replacing night without argument. You may notice that situations which once triggered panic now pass with ease, or that your body no longer reacts as it once did. This is evidence of alignment, not effort. The subconscious mind has accepted a higher truth, and it no longer needs fear as a protective strategy. Confidence arises naturally when you stop asking for permission to exist, and instead recognize that you belong everywhere you are. People respond to the certainty you hold within, not the perfection you try to project. When you release the burden of self-consciousness, you become conscious of something far greater, the presence of intelligence moving through every interaction. There is no longer something to prove, only something to allow. The suspense that once surrounded social moments dissolves, because you are no longer waiting for judgment or approval. You are anchored in inner approval that cannot be taken away. Each encounter becomes an opportunity to express life rather than defend against it. Fear loses its grip when it is no longer believed, and belief changes when truth is consistently affirmed. Even if echoes of the old habit appear, they no longer define you, because repetition without belief has no power. You are learning to live from assumption rather than reaction, from faith rather than memory. This shift alters not only how you feel around people, but how life meets you in every area. Opportunities expand, relationships deepen, and the world reflects back the calm authority you have claimed within. The journey from fear to freedom ends not with struggle, but with surrender to the understanding that you were always supported. When you trust the law, you no longer fear appearances, because you know appearances must follow belief. Let this understanding settle into your consciousness, because what you consistently hold in mind must come to pass. You are safe to be seen, safe to be heard, and safe to be exactly as you are. This is not a future promise. It is a present truth waiting for acceptance. Carry this awareness forward, and let it govern every interaction, knowing that confidence is not something you do, but something you allow. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.